Are you passionate about shaping India's future? Keen to find solutions for India's most pressing challenges? Look no further than Taksashila's postgraduate program in public policy. This 48-weekend program will equip you with the knowledge, skills, and network needed to pivot to a meaningful career in public policy. Apply in the link below by June 1st. The program begins June 20th. Hope to see you there.
Welcome to All Things Policy, a daily podcast by the Takshashila Institution. We are a bunch of policy nerds based in Bengaluru, and we like bringing fresh perspectives to Indian affairs and Indian perspectives to global affairs. So grab a cup of coffee, sit back, and join us for today's chat.
Hi, and welcome to another episode of All Things Policy. I'm Malathi Renati, and I head the policy school at the Takshashila Institution. And in today's episode of the All Things Policy, we'll be looking at Parasport from the public policy lens. So we're looking at from access and inclusion to performance and careers. And how does India treat Parasport? Is it as a welfare add-on or as a serious policy priority deserving investment, infrastructure, and career pathways? So we'll explore this through the government, the society, and the market's perspective. But first, let me introduce you to our guest. He's Dr. Ameya Kagali. He's an army-trained sports medicine physician, a major by rank, a chief physician for the India's Paralympic as well as Asian Para Games contingents, and one of India's leading voices on para-athlete care and performance. From the sidelines of both the Tokyo 2020 as well as the Paris 2024 Olympics, the Paralympics, to the Indian sports medicine and policy practice, Dr. Kagali brings very rare frontline insight into how India can better support para-athletes clinically, systematically, and as a society. So in this conversation, we'll sort of unpack the medical realities of parasport, the gaps in India's support structures, and how smart public policy can turn world-class resilience into world-class outcomes in the coming years. So welcome, Dr. Ameya.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for having me. And I'm quite excited to have this conversation surrounding parasport.
Thank you. Thanks. So I'd like to start with asking you, Ameya. So you've been on the field as a military doctor, a team physician for the IPL franchise as well, and now twice as the chief physician for India's Paralympics team. So can you walk us through, how the journey felt like, right? And what surprised you the most when you first stepped into the parasport world?
Actually, it was parasport choosing me rather than the other way around.
Okay.
So it all happened after my military service, and I did my post-graduation abroad. And when I came back to India, and Bangalore to be specific, I just wanted to do a small internship program in the Sports Authority of India in Bengaluru. And it so happened that the regional director was somebody from the armed forces.
All right.
So we instantly hit it off. And then once I started going more towards the ground. So first I was kind of unofficially designated with the Indian hockey team training for the Tokyo Olympics that time. And it was such a wonderful space to be in, because I love being around active people and not your typical clinician who would like to sit in a hospital or doing their rounds and all that. But then one fine morning, at around about 7 or something, I was just walking or going for my run at the ground inside Bangalore, where I just saw some wheelchair users throwing the shot put and the discus. And I was so ignorant that I just thought that, they are, because it was the time of COVID and stuff, that they are doing it for recreational purposes. And so I just walked up to the coach and I asked him, this is so cool, and it's really nice. And then he just looks at me and he's like, after the Olympics, after 3 weeks, there are the Paralympic Games, and these are the men and women who will be representing the country. And I was kind of taken aback, because I had a very vague idea of parasport as such. And I knew that it was competitive, but then India rising to the occasion and having participants with a formal structure, with rankings, and the training required, which was kind of going parallelly with the same campus where the Indian hockey team was training. Now in hindsight was a massive learning for me. And so that told me so many things, that, okay, one, there is quite a bit of competition. Secondly, is that the facilities are there, may not be for the kind of volume that India faces today post Paris. This I'm talking pre Tokyo, so it's all I'm talking for a period of timeline of 6 years.
Right.
So that got me too excited, and as you are aware that a para athlete is kind of holds a physical impairment. Which is permanent, which is one of the criteria to become a para athlete. So there's always this undertone of a medical condition with the particular athlete, which is not true for an able-bodied athlete. So how does that imbibe, or how do you imbibe the training with that condition for that particular sport? So I took it upon like a very beautiful challenge, because till date there are no proper textbook. How much ever advanced the medical science is, still we bank on research papers.
True. Yes.
So we don't know. Like I remember in medical school and even during my PG days, the first thing, suppose you have a left lower limb or a left knee pain, it's told to us that you first have to examine the normal knee kind of a thing, and then you have something to compare, because the same thing. Now in parasport you have an amputee, so you have only one knee joint. Now what will you compare that with?
Right.
So then you have to devise your own methods and methodologies. And whatever anatomy you've studied in the first year of MBBS, you have to apply that to, how can I best help this athlete in this scenario? What are the daily challenges? And we talk so much about loading, overloading. So I think that journey has transformed, and it just gotten more and more exciting. And in medical field, like in any other field, the more you know, it's like the lesser and lesser you think you know.
Yep.
So that was my major tryst with parasport, and I'm glad that I've been in this field for some time now, and I intend to do so for a few more years.
Yeah, no, wonderful. Thank you. Thanks for sharing that. And it's, as you rightly said, right, parasport also in India has traveled quite a long distance, in a relatively short time. The very fact that someone like you who was already in that in the field and then noticing that only post-COVID, right, reflects that. So just for our listeners, to give them an idea of the history of parasports and the policy instruments that were used, I sort of cherry-picked a few milestones or critical developments since our independence in this space, and I thought I'll just share that. So firstly, the 1900 was when the first modern day Olympics for able-bodied athletes was introduced. But it was not until 1960, so only 60 years later, that the first Paralympics was ever came into being. And it's only in 1968 that India actually sent a summer, made their debut in the Tel Aviv Games. We had a 10-member contingent then. But nothing much happened between then and, I guess, fast-forwarding 30 years. 2016, exactly, right? But in 1994 is when the registration of the Paralympic Committee of India, PCI, was institutionalized. And this was established to have a dedicated national body to select, prepare, and field para-athletes. And this was in coordination with the International Para Committee, right? That's how it was called. This was in 1994. But it wasn't till the early 2000s that there was social welfare schemes. And this is not just for sport, but it was more of an expansion of the disability welfare. And these were sort of sports-linked rehabilitation programs. So to rehabilitate through using sport. And these sort of provided, I would say, a limited but a growing public support for sports as an avenue for rehabilitation, to empower persons with disabilities to kind of recover or get better. But it was not integrated with any core sports policy till then. So this is again the 2000s, early 2000s. And as you mentioned, 2004 is when we had a few medals that were won at the Athens, Devendra Jajaria's gold in discus, and then we had Rajendra Singh in the powerlifting. And it was around the same time that there was a call for parity with respect to incentives as given for able-bodied Olympic medalists. So suddenly, it's now in the public, it's in the limelight, right?
Yeah. Firstly, kudos to all the homework that you've done. It's a lot of back and forth, and I'm glad that people know the history also. So, I mean, I would go back a little more. It has a very close military connect to it.
Right.
I can tell the audience is that is a father of Paralympics. That is Dr. Ludwig Guttmann. He was a Jewish German doctor. And he was a military doctor himself. So it all started as, again, wherever you go back to policies and how the boom has happened, is the origin is so beautiful. Like, you are an able-bodied soldier. One day you had a bullet injury or a mine blast, and then over the weekend you're suddenly bedridden.
Right.
Your mindset is just still that of an athlete. I'll tell you why I'm telling you this in a couple of minutes. It's like so with that kind of mindset, so you can do that, but yet you are bedridden because you are an amputee right
Physically not able to.
Exactly. So that archery was one of the first sport that started.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
So that why did it start? So that Dr. Ludwig Guttman felt that it's good for their mental health also, because an amputee, the dressing was done, the leg was amputated, the infection was gone. So then what do you do just sitting on the hospital bed? So then he took up in the hospital a backyard, and the easiest sport was something which was non-combat, which didn't require much of running around or even standing. So you just drag the wheelchair from one room outside, and then you set up a target, maybe 20 meters, 10 meters, and then you start archery. So you can imagine this, such a small kind of a thought led to something humongous in today's day and age.
Yes.
And that's where, even with the government and me being in the army, along with all the sports infrastructure and the federation, whatever it is, there's also the Army Paralympic notice started. So you're already dealing with this was in 2018.
Okay.
In principle, it was there. Then it was formalized. The center is in Pune. It's a dedicated center, like how we have the ASI, the Army Sports Institute, which is again in Pune. And we have had a lot of boys of all ranks, officers and the JCOs and Jawans, who is training in able body. But now since 2018-19, there's the Army Paralympic note that is started. So this, what happens is that, obviously there's a certain fitness criteria to get into the army.
Right.
But once what happens while you're in service, that's anybody's call. So it can happen while training, it can happen while in service, when you're posted, or it can happen even, we have a few soldiers who have taken leave and come back, and they have unfortunately met the road traffic accident.
Okay.
And, so these are the core population. So why I'm emphasizing so much on them is that, see, they already have a certain standard of fitness. So they don't need to start from scratch.
Right. Right.
As opposed to a civilian population. Not to say that we get only the unfit ones, but just that the whole scenario is of that of running and jumping and playing and that. So it's easy to handpick, or that can become a good breeding ground or a selection ground for them to do something in parasport. So that's one way how I would look at it. And also, like coming to the civil part of things, like how you rightly mentioned the timelines. Now that is also coinciding with the growth of parasport in India. Like when the note started in 2018-19. So 2016 in Rio Paralympics, we did well, obviously. But then the kind of jump that kind of jump has not been seen in any tournament in athletics, whether able-bodied in para, ever. So I'm coming to cut to 2021 in Tokyo. We had a contingent side of 54, where we had 19 medals. Now from 3 or 4 medals, or rather 12 medals from 1968 to 2016, to 19 medals in a single edition, that kind of jump is unseen and unheard of.
Yeah. Could you give us the reasons for that? I know that that's the Target Olympic Podium Scheme. It's been extended to para athletes by, for the Paris cycle with over 76 crores in funding. Right?
Yes.
This is a significant leap, obviously, but is there any other factors that contributed towards this?
The biggest factor is awareness, ma'am. So the way I would know is that many people are coming. It's not just restricted to do household things, or if you are visually impaired or 100% or 90% blind, that, you do certain things. And the whole, I feel somewhere objectivity is getting into its place rather than just empathy and sympathy.
Yes, and that's an important step.
That's very important.
Right.
So the main thing is that I tell the main difference of whether you'll have that infrastructure and most of all that will come at a later stage. First is the mindset. It's the gaze. Now, if anyone, even with a small limp, you see a country of so many people right on the street, a couple of people limping, instantly our eyes go there. So that is the starting point, is how I would look at it.
I just wanted to understand, with respect to the sports science and the medical support, how does that look like for para athletes? Because
it's still in a very, very nascent stage, because still there's a lot of crossovers happening, which is good. Even people are trying to find out. As I told you, in the medical field, the more and more you read, the lesser you know. I can give you with an example. If there's a wheelchair user, he's like a shot putter, for example.
Right.
And so what I'm trying to say is that he or she uses the wheelchair 24/7, as long as not sleeping. So the throws are done. Now cut to an able-bodied athlete, they might practice 10, 15, 20 throws and they come back. But these guys, when they come on the wheelchair, they have to move their shoulder constantly. So we see a lot of superimposed or an overtrained injury.
Right, right.
So how do you apply your medical knowledge as to reduce the load on the shoulders when outside of training?
Right.
So that matters. In general, sports medicine as a branch is still very nascent.
Very nascent.
Parasport, it is even a bigger niche. So the best person, is that you might have heard like a patient who's been a patient for a long time is like half a doctor. Because they know what's with their body. So that's where I really admire and I try to understand a better history from my para athletes, is that because they know themselves like no other people.
Right.
They can do something even if they don't have the most fancy orthotics or prosthesis. In remote villages, we have seen they do something with with the sugarcane stake or with a wooden stake or something like that. I'm not saying it might be right, but then are you able to provide a better option? Only then you have a say in that. Otherwise, it's not right for me to sit and comment, this is better. Why don't you do this?
Right,
The
right.
duty is also from ours is that not only just suggest, but also provide. Or to connect the two worlds where, we have medical representatives or medical equipment making companies where, they can pitch in and they come. So this I'm talking about factors outside of training. Because the challenge I feel lies bigger there rather than training infrastructure.
Yes, no, absolutely. And like you correctly mentioned, right, the diversity is not so much able-bodied and, the para athletes, but it's also the gender, right? We're looking at the gender as a differentiator, and then we have menstruation, we have specific health needs for women para athletes. So the medical sciences can only touch upon that much or understand that much of the human body, because each body again genetically is different. The ethnicity is different. So in the Indian versus the Caucasian, there's quite a bit of difference, right? And then the studies and the research that's been done is done on a smaller sample set. So you have spoken about menstruation and the specific health needs of women para athletes, right? Before the Paris 2024 as well. And this is a very rarely discussed, publicly it's very rarely discussed. So thanks for bringing that up, because I think it's the more conversations that we have around it, the more comfortable people get. It's normalized as a result, right?
Absolutely. It's normalized, and it should not be seen as something which is so difficult that it's out of reach. It's just a matter of putting your whatever you've read as clinicians, as physiologists, as gynecs, as obstetricians, to it challenges what you've read. Like, how can we do this differently? Yet the basics remain the same. So something on those lines. And when we talk about women, it's not that it's again I go back to the word. It's not so difficult once you know more and more. It's just about getting sensitized to it and finding their needs. Because ultimately, even though the anatomy has changed, it is still a human body.
Right.
The physiology has changed. It is still a human body, and that's what we are trained to teach. Just that you're adding a component of sport in it, which is at a competitive level.
Okay. So, but then how does the interaction between all of this, the disability, gender, and there's the hormonal physiology that creates, more unique risks, right? That the current protocols might be missing. What have you observed?
See, because I can understand why the protocols are missing also, because for any protocol to come into place, you need a decent sample size.
That's right.
Only and then we can divert from, and be flexible once you have a certain prototype. But here, I would rather not have a standard protocol. Of course, for normal, when it's a life-saving condition, then definitely yes. But when training is involved, I would like to keep it open field, but I would like to maintain data because that gives me a lot. So the small and the easiest change that one can do in a para athlete is that, see, I don't know whether you know if there's a case of seizures or a patient with convulsions. Okay, there's something always a chit in his pocket that we recommend. That I am a patient of so and so. They're not supposed to drive or something like that. Similarly, for a para athlete, out of training or in training, just a brief of their medical history and the kind of medication that they are on. Even if that kind of information is available, it can be a world of a difference. And see, these are the small changes which I would like to see in the para athlete, because it's very doable. It's not rocket science right now. So in someone in the city, what I would say is that I would be like, you make a bit of a concise of your medical document. You write on a piece of paper, whatever language you want, take a picture and say, email it to yourself. So that, or email it to your doctor, or somewhere where it can be retrieved.
Right. Yourself, like you mentioned, right? That's a wonderful point. Having
just, and it should be a very crisp description. Majority are like we see road traffic accident, date of this thing, what happened, and that's about it. If there's a genetic mutation, this were my reports, this was my year, and this is what has happened. Case of cerebral palsy, again, since birth. So I'm taking different cases. I'm trying to simplify complicated cases. So that what happens is that, for example, if someone like you or from a non-medical background also finds it, they know what to communicate. See, because even if you're not a medical person, if you know how to communicate it, half the job is done there.
Correct, yeah.
But when both are not there, then we have a bit of a problem. So, I mean, so those are the small changes and not too much. And of course, the hygiene protocols is as similar to anybody. Like thanks to, in policies where we use public toilets or whatever. It's just that if a woman has to use a certain public toilet, a para athlete has the surface has to be a little more cleaner because they're more susceptible. Now, again, if they're using a catheter or not a catheter. But that's where I say that people who are doing this on a day-to-day basis, on a weekly basis, listen to them. So that's where we go back to our third semester MBBS. We have a whole 6 months of history taking. Listen to the patient. Like whatever. Sometimes, yes, they may beat around the bush. They might talk about complaints which are, not relevant to that injury or whatever it is. But I think the first session needs a lot of time.
Yeah, and that's important too, because your diagnosis, right, is based on the
100%.
history, right? Yeah.
So that's what I say sometimes, dealing with a para athlete, it is more like an interrogation. Like, you're trying to find something which they think may not be important or which you think, or just make a note. So that's where I say the biggest difference in able body and para is the data that can be generated. That itself acts like a research proposal.
No, very, very valid point. And that's, I think, some data is something also that's lacking. It's not, in India especially, right? It's not captured. It's not centralized as in...
It's not centralized, and it won't make much of a difference for an able-bodied. Because if I have a 25-year-old footballer playing football in Bangalore and comes an ACL injury, I have plethora of papers. May not be of the same thing, but I know I can deviate maybe 10-15% from the protocol and I can still be fine. But if I have a 40-year-old wheelchair user who's met at the road traffic accident in 20 years, I can't use the same protocol with a 40-year-old of a wheelchair user who may be having a neuromuscular or neurodegenerative condition. They're totally different, just the output is the same. So it's better but if that lady has the 20-year-old data written, and when I say it's not those big files, it just can be summarized in 10 lines, basically if you know what to pick at. So that can be a wonderful starting point.
Right.
And the other part is that every para athlete has a certain class or a category.
Correct. IPC, right? The IPC has defined that in around 2007, I think it was.
Yes, it has come and it is undergoing changes as and when. So it basically depends on how the competition levels are also.
Right.
But almost to give you a very, very brief overview, there are 10 classes. There are more classes. Every sport has different things, but there are 10 ways to look at it. One is intellectual, one is visual, and remaining 8 are physical.
Okay.
So every para athlete on participating in Paralympics come under one of these 10 conditions. Nothing is outside of this. So even if that much is just mentioned below the diagnosis, majority, even if you're training in whatever, whether it's a private center or a government center, I think it can be well taken care.
Wonderful. Okay. Yeah, and the interesting part is, since you mentioned also, is that since the recent visibility, right, of the sector it's also reflected in the National Sports Policy of 2025.
Yes.
We have seen a section, as in a pillar, that has mentioned about people with disabilities, and then you have women and those who are with equity, and has to be improved. The National Sports Governance Act also, which is formally establishes the National Para Committee, it identifies that as a separate statutory body aligned to the Para Charter. So these are good developments that have happened. But however, at the same time, we do see that I have some data which says there are around 326 new sports infrastructure projects that were approved for around 3,000 odd crores. But the accessibility standards for people with disabilities in these facilities has not been publicly specified, in policy documents. So we have things on paper. We have funds that are kind of on paper put down, but then the implementation becomes a challenge. And I'm sure you must be seeing that, right?
Absolutely. See, I'll give you 2 examples in the way we are speaking right now. One is that the implementation challenge, forget about sport. Tell me how accessible India is as a country for para people.
PWDs, yeah, I see. No ramps, there are no...
Absolutely. So, even if anybody wants to, the whole idea is to make the individual independent.
Correct.
That's why when we tour abroad, even our athletes are surprised. They'll be like, "Acha, ye log khud se sab kuch karte hai." So I don't want to blame them because they have the facilities there. So the whole, it's actually beautiful. I was there in Paris a week before the Olympics, so I saw the arrangements. And when we go to the Paralympics, you see that there won't be even a 3 centimeter step that is left without a ramp. I'm talking 3 centimeters. I'm not even talking. So you'll see, even when the mess is there, the dining hall, the place where you serve your food from, that is also lowered. What if you have a dwarf population coming in? Because there is one criteria for them. There is a wheelchair user. Again, they keep their food tray on there. So these are the small things,
But they make a huge difference because it's very inclusive then, right?
100%. So even in an Indian household, like I invited one of my para athletes home a few years back, and I remember that we have that little step in front of our door.
Yeah.
I mean, that's so normal for all of us. But then I'm like, oh, like now what? Like we had to literally lift that person. So I'm saying, from a civic point of view, forget sport.
Correct.
Should be a mindset change as to, okay, in a world from through their lens, how can we ease it? Then we shall get answers. And with infrastructure, be it in the hostel or the training facility. So what I say is that developing a training facility when the athlete goes to the ground and then asking the athlete to train is the easiest part for a policymaker. It is the distance from there. How do you make the athlete reach that place? That is the challenge.
Yeah, and that's a challenge we see in and it's something that urban planning should take care of, right? I mean, we're looking when you have the pavements that are made, when we have accessibility to even basic things like hospitals and institutions, right? Even workplaces. I think that's where India has a long way to go.
But still, I would say, ma'am, hospitals are better equipped because obviously you have these surgeries and lower limb surgeries. So, but the other places like the schools, the parks, the community halls, even stages where conferences we go to. So now, like the I see what the mind knows, they say, right? So that now when I'm observing, it's like, okay, if there is a doctor who is on a wheelchair, now what? Because we have a lot of people in the community, in the administration at the IPC level, those who have been former para athletes. I know you'll be coming to that point also.
Right.
So so we have a very well-established neurologist. I think he's from Netherlands or somewhere, so he's a classifier, and he was a former para-athlete, and then he went on to do his medicine. So it's a very inspiring story. And so when people like that come in the decision-making, they can give a first-hand view of what they would like, which you and me sitting out there would never be able to even imagine unless we're working in that field.
And I think that's the reason why we need to have the right people in the right position.
Right position.
Yeah, because they are well informed, they have lived it.
Yeah, and they know the challenges. So to solve a problem, you need to understand the problem first.
Yeah. So what would you think are I know the long-term athletic development pathways has been mentioned also in the National Sports Policy in 2025. It's just maybe mentioned in passing, but then we know that other countries like Australia, the US, Canada, countries in Europe, they have career pathways that exist where after the sports career of an athlete ends, and I'm specifically referring to para-athletes, in India, of course, that's more or less non-existential at this point, but because the system sort of abandons them, right? What suggestions do you have how we can do things differently?
See, I would suggest like there are two aspects to look at it. One is that the countries that you mentioned don't need a separate program because the same rule applies for athletes able-bodied also.
That's right, yeah.
So you have somebody who's doing a master's parallelly. After that, they'll do their PhD also, stuff like that. And then they go back to their work. They don't live on those past laurels, But here in India, it's a clear division. It's either studies or sport.
Yeah.
Coexistence is an unheard theory, So I think when that comes together, we can start talking. And when we are talking about para athletes coming back to the system, or there's a just now recently they are involving people with the coaching diploma, and some private NGOs are training the coaches or the athletes who are in the back end of their careers. But again, I would say is that when you spoke about LTAD, right, the long-term athlete development program, like how we have for able-body, we have the 6 to 9 age group, 9 to 12, 12 to 15, teenagers, later. That is very difficult to do in parasport. And the reason is that you have somebody with a hereditary or a genetic or a congenital condition, or for 30 years, 35 years, you've lived a IT corporate life, and then you have a mishap, fall from a height.
Yes, and we've seen many cases like that.
Exactly. So age has little or nothing to do with parasport. But what goes in their favor is that, like, if you have a prioritized fitness-based sport, like for example, any throwing sport or fencing for that matter. I mean, I have a world champion who picked up fencing at the age of 45. They trained for 6 years. At 51, is a world champion. Now, I can't think of any such example in able-bodied sport with this kind of a story.
Right. No, absolutely.
So there is no timeline. So equating LTAD from able body into parasport, I think it's a little difficult because that's never going to happen. But what can be done is that, again, provide awareness to be physically fit or physically active, inculcate movement science, where a competitive level of sport is a byproduct. If he comes to that level, great. But even if that's not there, you can do your training within your limits. Something. So when you will remain fit for life, which is again applicable for able-bodied also.
Exactly.
Now there's so much of talk going on of longevity medicine, biohacking, and being fit and stuff like that. Same holds true for even para-athletes or even individuals with certain amount of disability, right? And secondly is that when you're talking about the, I'm sorry, I didn't get you. Your movement, you said, right? Something.
Yes, no, I was referring to the pathways.
The career pathways, yeah. So when you come back, especially those who can communicate well, they can be better role models as to how to give them a nice pathway for the upcoming para-athletes.
Yeah, of course, things like coaching, classification, as you mentioned, right? You said, and as well as sports science support, event management, disability inclusion.
See, classification, again, you need a medical degree more often than not. So that's what I said, like, even if you're a doctor, like there are certain people who've gone pursue their MBBS after becoming a para-athlete. But even if that's not that, at least they can come into the system to bring about changes, like, as you said, like an event manager or just as a counselor. So I'll give an example of an amputee counseling another amputee. But then again, under what genre will you put that? What will be their education qualification? This still, I think we are talking a little too vague. And the population is too minute for it. The other thing is that maybe, okay, if they are good in a certain language or a skill or communication or something, go to that person or that particular state and work with those athletes out there. And the other, what comes at the top of my mind is that easiest thing is coaching in that sport.
That's true. That will come naturally also.
That will come naturally for them.
I think they'll be more comfortable, right, in that role.
Yeah, they'll be more comfortable in that role, and also some kind of a mentor who can manage. And some courses where it doesn't need that much of physical ability, but then more of that mental strength. I think we can think of policies like that, because we see even in able-bodied, they have been made assistant directors in Sports Authority of India, or a level 1 coach or a level 2 coach. I think those kind of jobs will be like wonderfully suited for this kind of population.
Yes. No, that's great. I think great advice. So just the last question I had was, if you were sort of advising like a policy committee that designing India's parasport investment strategies, for the next decade, let's say. So not just for the upcoming Olympics, but we're sort of trying to build a more sustainable system.
Yeah.
What are the 2 or 3 highest leverage investments that would sort of make the most difference in your opinion?
I think one is the awareness that when we're talking about awareness, it is very specific awareness. I'm not saying put hoardings all across the city and talk about this. No, it's about going to specific institutions or school for the blind, or there's a CP clinic going on in certain hospitals. There's a burn injury in hospitals. You try to approach these specific centers. Right? That's what I've started, or at least hope to start in Ameya. So initially what we have a cerebral palsy clinic twice a week where we have all these children come. So maybe instead of like showing an IPL match on screen, where they can just see, show them parasport where CP athletes are playing at the highest level.
Right. So it also motivates them, right?
Motivates them. Same thing, exactly. So even in a burn unit, every big tertiary care hospital has a different burn unit.
Right.
So you can talk about stories where athletes have developed these contractures, something, and then they are playing a sport. So that is a targeted group. That's point number 1. Secondly is that at least like a hub and spoke model where you have certain facilities which encourages physical movement. I'm not yet come to sport. It's just start moving. Do something which is more physical, but ensure that the environment is such that it is relatively safe for the individual to do it. I'll give you a very small example. One is that if you have like a like in a path, if you have a wheelchair user, somewhere to park it, and then the timing should be separate for them so that they can form their own community.
Right.
And I know this because it has already been started to implement in the army.
Oh, okay.
Okay, again, I'm coming out to APN and these people out there. Then the last thing would be try and give them that hope where you can do something for the country, because ultimately hope is all what we all live on.
Right.
So that would be the 3 steps. First is awareness, then is the infrastructure, and then is excellence. Rather than just, so once you have a nice bedrock of people, it's like a pyramid structure. First, start off with movement, start off with this thing, and then the championship should be byproduct. I think where we go chasing is that, no, we want medals.
Yes.
That's not going to happen. We want participation first.
Right.
And before participation, we want a selection pool. Then the whole community will build. At every top nation in the world winning medals, you should see the number of participants. They are humongous.
That's true. Yeah. And I think in India, we get that wrong because we've always been a nation, as a country, right? We love big events and we love to be kind of on top of the podium, but we don't realize that the grassroots, I mean, just for example, physical activity, just the basic building block, right, of any sport, whether it's able-bodied or not, is what we need to invest in.
It's the foundation. Absolutely. The better, the stronger the foundation, more is the pool, better is the pool, then you can build on, and then you'll get the best of people on top also.
Yeah.
So I think that's, and it's still, I think it's very doable. It's not a far-fetched thought.
No, and like you mentioned, the awareness is a big one, Maya. I think that's something that many people, there are a lot of myths, in fact, that have to be busted because they feel...
Another word I'll add actually is targeted awareness. We're missing out on that. If I go to promote parasport in like an ENT department, I mean, it's good. They will hear me out, but then what?
That's true.
But the same thing in a targeted approach will make a huge difference.
Yeah, absolutely. So one final question I have for you in terms of what you would like to advise to our listeners. So for any young medical student, physiotherapist or sports science graduate, right, who's listening to this, someone who's maybe thinking about whether to specialize in parasport medicine, what would you say to them?
One thing is that come with an open mind. The basics should be very solid. Like your anatomy and your physiology should be like top-notch stuff, because you got to unlearn many things.
True.
You can unlearn only when you learn. The first point is that, and it'll 100% make you a much, 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 much better clinician. So if you get an opportunity to intern or even examine one para-athlete a week or one individual with a certain disability in a month, just to examine them, take down their history, that can be your benchmark for future references. And if you want to come into sport, then try for opportunities in just as an intern first with in Sports Authority of India in Gandhinagar or in Bangalore or in Sonipat. These 3 names I'm taking because these are the 3 where majority of the para athletes do train.
Okay.
And then, I mean, you'll get to know more about the system, how it works.
I think the path unfurls itself. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. So this is the basics. Like at least whichever city you're in, whichever village you're in, I'm sure there'll be at least one person with some kind of disability, just to see how they move. Even if it's an amputee at the shoulder level, how does the right move and how does the left move? So if you just understand and observe them and how they go about their day-to-day life, trust me, it'll make them a very, very good clinician in years to come.
Thank you so much, Ameya, also for sharing not just your experiences but also your suggestions. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me, and hope to continue the association, and I'm happy to help in whatever way I can.
Thanks, Ameya. So before we close, would like to just remind our listeners that the applications for our 48-week PGP program is closing in less than a month. So please do go to school.takshashila.org.in and select PGP in the course drop-down menu, and you'll see all the details there. Thank you all. Bye-bye.
If you liked our show, dive into Takshashila's research on technology, strategy, and economic affairs. Check us out at our Twitter handle @TakshashilaINST or our website takshashila.org.in.